Section 4, Creating Weapons. Over the course of this section, we are going to dive into all of the aspects in order to create a simple weapon that can be expanded upon and built on for your own projects. While we're only going to be discussing how to create one gun, the concepts taught within this section can easily be expanded to create as many weapons as you'd like for your game. In this first video, we are going to see what VRTK already has in terms of an interactable object and see how we can create our own prefabricated object which we can use within our testbed level. If we go to the project window here and we go to the VRTK examples folder, you'll notice that item 5 is interactions, interactable objects. And if you go through the level, you'll see that as we go through here, there's a ton of different objects that we can interact with. And so if we go ahead and play the game, we'll be able to see some examples of potential objects that we can use for our own projects. All right, so here we are in this new example. And you'll see that there's an example talking about how the objects are touchable, grabbable, or usable at the controllers. In this case, you'll use the grab buttons or the triggers in order to use them. We're going to go ahead and look at one object in particular, and I highly suggest that before you continue, that you look at all of these objects to see how they interact with and how they could possibly be used with your game. But for what we're going to be doing with our weapon is very similar to some things which you can do with these particular objects. So to begin with, the first thing that we're going to deal with is right over here. So we're going to go ahead and move the analog stick, tap in order to move. And you'll notice on the left-hand side here, you'll see that there are two fairly simple guns. And if I use this and I use my grabber, I'm able to pick it up, and same thing with the other one. And you'll notice that if I press the trigger button, it shoots out a projectile. There are a lot of things that are going on behind the scenes here, but I think you can see how these can potentially be used for our own projects. So we're going to be using one of these as a default that we can then expand upon and create our own weapon our own way. In our case here, we see that from our scene, from the hierarchy window, you'll see that there are a number of different objects here. And scene objects, if we open it up, actually has, for each of these different stations, the objects that we're looking for. Now in our case, our gun is right over here, and I could get it by selecting it. As you can see here, it's inside the snap handles station. But let's say I knew the name of the object, but I didn't want to move around the world to get to it. Well, I can go to the hierarchy tab here, and you'll see that there's this search bar on the top left of the screen. If you type in the name of an item, so for instance, gun, you'll see that it only has the objects with the word gun inside of it. And in our case here, you'll see that there's dummy gun 1, dummy gun 2. I'm going to go ahead and just use one of them. It doesn't matter which one. And then once selected, go ahead and press Control-C to copy this object. You can also go to Edit, Copy in order to save it. We're then going to go to the project view and go to the FPS game scenes folder, and then double click to open up our test bed. And then double click to open up our test bed. We're going to X out the gun name here, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this object into the scene. You'll see that it's currently here, and if we go ahead and play the game, we should see the gun work out for us. All right, so if we turn over here to our left, you'll see that there is the gun, and it doesn't seem like I'm able to pick it up currently. In order for the gun to work, our actual script aliases need to have support for the ability to grab and use our gun object. But in order to grab an object, we first have to be able to touch it. So in our case, we're going to go ahead and select both the left and right controller aliases. Afterwards, we're going to go ahead and click on the Add Component button. And we're going to go ahead and type in VRTK Interact. We're going to use Interact Touch. That will allow our objects to actually respond to being touched and to have the ability to grab it. VRTK Interact Grab. And then finally, VRTK Interact Use. So the use is what's allowing us to use the trigger button to shoot, and the Interact Grab allows us to use the grip button in order to actually grab the object. So now if we go ahead and play the game, I can go ahead, grab the object, and I can shoot it just like we did in the previous level. Let's take a closer look at this dummy gun so we see what we actually have here. You'll notice that the object has a transform like every other object does, and has this VRTK Interactable Object script. This is the component that allows us the ability to grab and to use these particular objects. There's also a child of controller grab attach, which is saying that once you pick it up, to snap the position to this game object, generic snap handle. And if you click that, you'll see that on this object, that the handle has been positioned at the edge here. So this is where our controller is going to snap to whenever we hold it. You'll also see that there is a grab action component. This enables us in code to be able to do something whenever we grab it. We have a normal rigid body component, just like Unity is used to, which means that the object will fall. And then we have this Interact Object Appearance script, which is used in order to modify how the object will work when it's being grabbed, used, touched, etc., etc. We also have Interact Haptics, which is used to provide a rumble effect using a sound for how high or how much rumble should happen depending on if it's being used, grabs, touched, etc., etc. There's also a script here called Gun Shoot, and later on we're going to customize this to be our very own script instead. But since we're going to be modifying this from the original VRTK elements, I'm going to rename this object from Dummy Gun 1 to instead be Handgun, because that's what we're actually going to be building. Press Enter to complete, and afterwards, I'm going to go ahead and go to FPS Game here in the project view, and we're going to right-click and create a new folder called Prefabs. And then from there, we're going to enter the Prefabs folder, and then I'm going to drag and drop the handgun inside here, and then let go. It's going to ask if we want to create a new prefab or a variant. We're going to go ahead and create an original prefab. So that will allow us to be able to remove things and not have to worry about modifying what VRTK originally gave us. And it also helps protect the original VRTK object, so if anything ever went wrong, we could always refer to that later on. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Original Prefab, and you should see it is now located here. And if I double click on this, or I click on the Open Prefab button from the inspector, you'll see this object in a window that is isolated from everything else in our scene. And this will make it very easy for us to make adjustments without having to worry that it's part of our particular level. And so with that, we're going to start working on the next aspect of our gun.